As an MSP business owner, are you looking to get rid of sales as quickly as possible? Are you counting down those days? Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you probably have more days left in the sales role than you probably have anticipated, because owner-led sales is one of those things that kind of lives on even after you hire some sales folks. My name's Adam Henneman. Welcome to Ramblings of a Geek. I've been in the MSP space for a better part of a couple of decades, and I've talked to lots of different salespeople, lots of different sales teams, helped kind of build out some sales team structures in the past. And one thing that's consistent is that owner-led sales is just part of the game. You're going to have to be good at it for quite a long time. And so let's talk about how you can make the most of your time as an owner in an owner-led sales world. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the underlying problem with owner-led sales and why people want to get out of it, because people just don't like to be salespeople for the most part, especially those of us in the MSP space where we are, generally speaking, technicians who started a business. That's for the typical MSP story, right? It's a technician that started an MSP because they wanted to kind of go do their own thing, and they start selling a little bit because you have to, right, at that size. Well, one of the first things that those types of MSPs want to get rid of is that sales component, because it's not really our thing. The challenge is that nobody else but you as the owner can do all of the things that need to happen. The problem that you also have is that you are also wearing all of the hats, right? Especially when you're getting going, right? You're doing the tech work, you're doing the sales stuff, you're doing anything that's related to marketing, you're doing all the bookkeeping, you're doing all of these things. And so you start shedding some of the roles, right? Which is a thing you have to do. You have to get rid of some of the stuff that you shouldn't be doing any longer. The challenge is that trying to hand off that sales role first or early is much harder than it is to hand off some of the stuff that you already know how to do, right? The tech side of the world and hire a bookkeeper and those things that are pretty well defined already. So let's talk about just kind of how to kind of shift your sales efforts as you grow your business. As an MSP owner, sales is going to be part of your job for a long time, as I've already talked about. But let's talk a little bit about some of the pieces that have to kind of slot in along the way for you to be able to even think about handing it off, right? Because early on, as you're doing all of the things, you're going to networking meetings and you're talking to people, building relationships and all those kinds of things, that becomes a core part of your sales process early on. And if it's not, and you're a smaller MSP, it really probably should be where you focus today. But you do all of these things early on, and you sort of develop some version of a process. And maybe the process isn't great, but you have some version of a process. Well, here's one of the challenges that many MSPs have is they don't write this process down, and they don't iterate on the process and make it deliberately better over time, because it's just not a thing that they like to do. And it's just a thing that you don't want to do long term, so you just never kind of bother writing it down, or you don't spend too much time developing the process. But the key is that if you don't have a process written down, a couple things happen. The first thing is that you don't have any opportunity to really actually iterate on the process in a real way. You can't see where leads are coming in short or where you're having issues in the process and it's getting bogged down. And so you don't really necessarily improve it overall, which can also lead to some frustrations with sales. But also, if you don't have some version of a sales process, even a light version of one, you're gonna have a real hard time trying to hand that off to a salesperson that you hire, right? Because presuming the average MSP business owner is a tech or came from being in the technical space, leading techs, hiring techs, dealing with techs is something that they're usually pretty good at. Most MSP business owners don't spend a lot of time dealing with salespeople in a collaborative capacity, and certainly not in a management capacity, because leading salespeople requires different skills than leading techs. Now, some of the skills overlap for sure, but the average salesperson needs different things than the average tech does. So you need to think about that. And there's actually a lot of different books and other programs out there that kind of teach you how to lead salespeople. If you really, really want to get out of being the main sales delivery person at your company, you need to build a process and you need to learn how to manage salespeople in order for that to even be a thing. I've seen a number of MSPs hire a salesperson and it does not go well at all. Mostly because there's lack of process. The owner or whomever is kind of leading the sales team is not really a great sales leader. There's a lot of emphasis on learning all the tech and those kinds of things. Right? There's all kinds of things that earlier stage MSPs struggle with trying to offload that sales stuff. So that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of apprehensive about MSPs in general handing off the sales role quickly anyway. If you're getting some value out of this video, please do me a favor, go ahead and hit that like button. So if I'm suggesting that you need to be in the sales role a little bit longer, what can you do to kind of build out your sales skills and like level that part of it up? Because you might as well get good at it, right? So the first thing is that you need to build relationships first. First and foremost, you must build relationships. Many MSPs, when they struggle with the sales side of the world, they struggle with the whole idea around lead generation, not so much like closing a deal. Now, certainly closing a deal might be a little bit more of a challenge for some, but usually it's more about getting those early stage leads. So one of the things I think you need to do as a business owner, as a learning salesperson, is to get some practice building relationships. Go to networking meetings, go to chambers of commerce events, go when a client has an open house, go there, go places where you have an opportunity to speak to people that might possibly want to do business with you, or maybe they have clients that are in your target client profile as well, right? That you want to be in the space of those other people, and you want to practice building relationships, because building relationships is the single best way to generate sales at any level, because people buy from people, right? So think about that and kind of develop that part of your practice. The second piece of this, and it's really kind of related to this, is that when you are meeting these people, you must be curious about them. You must be curious about their business. You want to learn about them, not jump into pitching about your business. Because when you start jumping right into pitching about your business, it's really disingenuous, and that really turns people off, right? But if you ask them questions, you're curious about how they work, how their business works, the challenges they're running into, and just have a conversation with these people, they're much more likely to want to talk to you. And even if they're not a good fit for you, just get in the practice of being curious about people. And then as you work your way through all of this, document your process. Figure out what it takes to turn somebody from a suspect, meaning that you're barely talking to them, to a prospect where they may be interested in your business, to the discovery and the proposals, and like think about all of those stages all the way along. I made a sales process video a long time ago. I'll drop a link up above. I probably should update it, but the idea here is that you want to build a process so that way you can figure out where in your process things go well and where they struggle a little bit, right? So if you figure out that your proposal stage, people get to the proposal stage and they're either not good fits, or your proposal's too long, or whatever, like if you get stuck in one spot, then you need to figure out what's going on with that, right? Usually when you build the relationship and you have an actual prospect as an MSP, especially as an MSP business owner, you usually can kind of get your way through that process, whatever that happens to be. But I've talked to a number of business owners where they've been struggling with, bringing a bad fit prospect too far down the process, or just like the proposal stage was a struggle, or whatever, right? So there's lots of things you can do by building and then analyzing your sales process. I don't just do these videos. I also release a newsletter about once a month. I'm going to drop the link down below to subscribe, and I'll actually throw it on the screen as well. So you've been working on your sales efforts. You've hired some technical people. You're not really in charge of technical stuff too much on a day-to-day basis. When would you maybe be ready to hire a salesperson, or think about hiring a salesperson? So one of the first things I look for most MSP business owners to do is to hand off account management. You want to hand off account management to somebody else that's not you, that's also not going to be your salesperson, because account management and sales hunting are dramatically different activities, and you do not want the same person doing both. Because what's going to happen if you hire a person to do both account management and sales hunting is they're going to gravitate towards one or the other, and they're going to probably leave the other one behind because it's not their happy place, and they are, like I said, dramatically different skill sets. So hand off account management to somebody else that's not the salesperson and not you, because you are going to need to learn how to lead that sales organization as you try to grow it. The next piece is you have your sales process defined. Now, understand that just because you have it defined doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean you're not going to tweak it when you hire a salesperson, but you have something written down that you've been following for a little while, and you know where the pitfalls are, and you've adjusted for things along the way, right? Having that process and having some awareness around what works and what doesn't for you is a really smart thing, and pretty much a requirement for most MSPs. The next piece is you've got some revenue milestones I think you need to hit, right? If you're under $1 million, you don't have the money to spend on a salesperson in any which way, shape, or form. If you're over $1 million, but like under 3 to 5, somewhere in there, You could probably hire someone to maybe set some appointments for you or do some like outreach, but you're not likely handing off the whole sales process. This is where you maybe hire a part-time person to do cold calls for you, or help with networking events, or you bring on a service that can do some of that stuff for you, or like you're basically hiring somebody to just do the prospecting piece of it, to get prospects to hand off to you as the owner. And then maybe that $3+ million range, you're starting to look to hand off the full sales process. The reality is that as an MSP business owner, you're going to be in the sales process for quite a while, no matter where you are in the journey. Probably never fully out of it, because even let's say you've hired a sales staff and you have a sales manager and they have salespeople that work for them. As an MSP business owner, you should still probably be out there doing some networking. You should still be meeting some people, still building relationships, because when you continue to do that, you keep the pipeline fed with a lead here or there, and you continue just to be a force in your community, because that's a really solid way to continue to get more and more referrals. And most of all, in my opinion, you need this at every stage. It can be redefined as you grow, but most of all, you must have a target client profile. You need to know what a good client looks like. You need to be able to teach your salesperson, your sales manager, whomever you're going to hire, what a good client looks like. If you can't do that, you can't hire a salesperson. They are going to just fill your pipeline with garbage leads. They're going to just take away a ton of your time, or worst case scenario, you're going to sign a bunch of bad fit clients. That's far worse than just having to talk to some bad fit leads. So you must have a defined target client profile where you are aiming your sales and marketing efforts at. If you aren't doing that, you're not ready to hire a salesperson. What I will do is I will link a video up above about target client profile, which will help you kind of define what that looks like for you and your business. So when you think about success in either owner-led sales, or when you hire somebody to do sales activities for you, there's a few measures of success you want to think about, right? Now, obviously, the end result is closed deals, closed endpoints, closed revenue, whatever that looks like, right? The finish is closed. Well, one of the things I want you to think about along the way is things like, early meetings had, proposals delivered, follow-up conversations. Like there's a few steps along your process that you want to think about from an earlier metric perspective that says, hey, we're doing well or we're not doing well, right? I would think that one of your earliest metrics would be like meetings held, like actual meetings held with people that might be able to do business with you or maybe refer your business, right? That's one of the very first things I would think about as somebody trying to run a sales team or be an owner-led salesperson, right? Those are two really big important things. Because ultimately, you need to understand where the health of your sales process lives, right? You need to pay attention to the metrics. You can't just wait on closed deals. You have to look at things earlier on than that. Now, if you hire a firm or a person to do cold calling for you or those kinds of things, you're going to obviously want to track those calls or some of those things. But what you really want to do is think about the metrics along the way, of which there's probably 3 or 4 that you really want to pay attention to make sure that someone's tracking kind of how things are going. Because many MSPs that I talk to, I ask them how's their pipeline, how many leads do they have, and a lot of times they kind of look at me with a deer in the headlights, or they don't really have an idea around what that looks like. And that says to me that they're not really tracking some of that early stage stuff. If you don't track and understand the early stage stuff, it's pretty hard to get to a prescribed end stage of a deal close. So think about the process, think about managing the metrics along the way and paying attention to what's going on, because there are different activities all along the way that have to happen in order for that deal to go from, brand new prospect to close, right? And really some of the bigger challenges, it actually starts before the prospect starts, right? It's that converting somebody from what we would call like a suspect, somebody who is maybe casually interested in your business, to actually becoming a prospect where you're actually talking to them about like real things as it relates to your business, right? There's a lot of stuff that happens out there that you want to start measuring, which might be a little bit different for you and your business, but really it's like meetings held, networking meetings attended, things like, people in your newsletter, or like there's all kinds of things you can use to kind of like look at the early stage stuff. So I would really invite you to investigate some of that piece, especially if you aren't getting enough leads in the front door. At the end of the day, sales is not easy. There's a reason why salespeople get paid pretty good money to do what they do, especially when they do it well. Most of us as MSP business owners didn't go into the business to become salespeople. It just wasn't the thing that we loved to do because that just wasn't what we did. But you still have to be good enough at it in order to have a successful MSP. So don't just look to hand your sales stuff off as quickly as you possibly can. Look to get good at it so that way when you hand it off, somebody else does it well for you. And many MSPs that I talk to haven't figured out what does good look like in their sales process. So figure that out first and then hand it off. In the meantime, there's a couple other videos I think you should take a look at. I'm going to drop a video up here about prospecting, and I'm going to drop a video up here about target client profile. Those two things are really important things to think about when it comes to developing your sales process. Thanks for coming on this round with me. I hope to see you on the next one.